next week. You can find the link in the chat. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the UBC Career Center and the UBC Vancouver Point Grey campus are situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. Today, you may be joining us from many places with many different histories, but I invite you to continually reflect on what it means to learn, work, or live on Musqueam land. We'll share a few resources that may be helpful down in the chat. Before we get started, take our attendance survey to let us know you're here. You can access the survey through the tiny URL provided or scan the QR code on the screen. By filling out the attendance survey, you will get a recording of the webinar and also a link to our post-event survey for a chance to win one of 6 $25 gift cards. I also want to introduce myself. My name is Primo Huang, and I'm an employer and alumni engagement assistant with the UBC Career Center, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today. As an international student, I know it may be difficult to juggle different responsibilities from our studies, work, and also social life. So I'm really excited to have a chat with our speaker, Elson, and learn more about the strategies he implements to tackle this. Whilst in our event space, I'd also like to remind everyone that all members of the UBC community are expected to uphold a respectful environment in which civility, diversity, opportunity, and inclusion are valued. At the UBC Career Center, you'll find our Workland program, our career development coaches, virtual workshops, online resources, as well as the employer and alumni team who create opportunities to engage with employers and professionals through career fairs, employer information sessions, and our own Careers Online job board. You can visit us at Brock Hall or through our account at Careers Online to learn more about our services. Today's event is part of Launch Your Career in Canada. So a bit about Launch. So this is UBC's annual networking experience, open only to UBC international students, which is dedicated to supporting their career development. In the next 2 weeks, you'll have the opportunity to connect and network with industry professionals in a panel and networking setting. Discover how to navigate work and research opportunities at UBC, develop job search skills, and learn how alumni made a successful transition from UBC to the Canadian workplace. Launch will include a series of in-person and also virtual events from March 6th up to the 17th. You can register for these events all on Careers Online. All participants are muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to turn on your camera as it'll be nice to see your faces as we go through our event. We will also be having a Q&A opportunity in the second half of today's office hour. Some of you have already sent us your question, and I will make sure to get to those questions throughout our Q&A. You're also welcome to either send in your questions through Zoom chat once our Q&A starts, or also you can use your mic or camera to ask a question. Please raise your hand and we will do our best to provide you with an opportunity to speak with Elson. I'm now happy to introduce today's speaker, Elson Lim. When Elson was a student at UBC, his friends knew him as an incredibly career-driven one. While Elson's peers were participating in Jumpstart, the 2-week orientation program for international students, he was already sending in his resumes and interviewing for part-time positions before the school year started. Within the 2 weeks, Elson received his first job offer and was earning double the minimum wage before the end of the year. Since then, Elson's career has spanned from business to technical roles at the Ministry of Finance, Scotiabank, and also Deloitte. Currently, Elson is a senior data engineer at Birch Hill, a leading private equity firm in Canada. Elson's drive comes from the fact that his parents were close to retirement, yet still took on loans to financially support his education. Not wanting to be a burden to them, being financially independent as quickly as possible was a key focus during Elson's time in school. What Elson's hoped to share during this Alumni Office Hours session is his journey through work, school, and life in hopes it may help you get closer to your goals and navigate the financial circumstances you may find yourself in. I'll now pass the floor to Elson. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Primo. Appreciate the intro. Cool. Should I get started with kind of my intro and the rest of the talk? All right, I'll take this, yes. All right, so a little bit of the intro, kind of extending from what Primo mentioned earlier. I'm an international student from Malaysia. I started out actually in the Faculty of Arts back in 2015 with the intention of completing economics and psychology. But in my second year, I kind of decided like ours is not for me. There are some things that I didn't quite agree with the program. So I transferred over to business school, eventually completed my BCom in 2020 with a co-op program, honors, all that kind of good stuff. Now, currently, I'm in Toronto. Like as mentioned, I'm working as senior data engineer at Birch Hill Equity. For context, for those who may not be familiar, what a private equity firm does is we buy companies roughly at $50, $500 million in valuation and kind of sell it after 3 to 5 years, hopefully making a lot more money as a result. Some of the things that Birch Hill's owned in the past are Sleep Country, that mattress retailer you may have seen around town. Maple Leaf Sports, which is the owner of Raptors, Maple Leafs hockey team, Toronto FC, some of the sports teams, Shredded, a bunch of interesting businesses. So that's kind of what I do day to day. In terms of the work of a data engineer, it's very much automating a lot of stuff. I found working hard blindly, and you'll find this as a theme in my talk too, to be quite a waste of time. So I'm always looking for smarter ways to do things, automating things. So my work touches on machine learning and engineering there too, if anyone's interested in those topics. And also sometimes building out analysis for CFOs, board members, stuff like that. So before I jump into the whole work-life balancing, I kind of give you a rundown of my experience so far. Job-wise, I started out very simple job, folding clothes at a Calvin Klein store for $2 an hour in Malaysia. So nothing very fancy there. First job in Canada, as kind of alluded to earlier, was within my first week being in UBC, I was hired in to this call center, the Alumni Engagement Office. I'm not sure if you guys still have that. I know if the job is quite a sketchy one, if I'm being perfectly honest, but hey, it was $1 above minimum wage and paid the bills, so I could complain there. First real job was being a bank teller at Van City, where I earned like $20 an hour, which by the time was like absolutely fantastic as a student. So can share you some tips as to how I made it happen. Got some contract work as a research analyst at CFI, and what that does is I was pretty much paid to write articles for about $40 an hour. And I'll touch a little bit more about how you can use jobs like this to kind of scale up your earnings and help make student life a little bit more affordable. From there, I worked in Ministry of Finance as a co-op, worked at data analyst at Scotiabank. My first job post-graduation, actually, as a highlight, is I actually ended up earning less than I did as an intern at Scotiabank when I worked at a startup in Neo Financial. And it kind of sucked, but I eventually found a way to kind of still learn things on the job. Went on to become a data engineer / financial crime consultant at Deloitte, where I kind of multiplied my earnings by about 1.5 to 2x. And then from there, after a year working at Deloitte, I kind of went to Birch Hill and became about 1.5 to 2x what I made at Deloitte too. Some fun facts: guitarist at a rock band. I write music on the side. It's just something I always enjoyed doing. I'm leading an informal boxing club at work, and so so that's a little bit of my life. And hopefully now I've kind of learned a few tips on balancing both elements to it. But when I was a student at school, it wasn't so straight-laced and comfortable. I think, as Primo mentioned earlier, my family was never very well off, and I didn't realize how bad it was until midway through school. I realized there's this whole mountain of debt that my family had built up to kind of try supporting themselves while I went through school, paying tuition and things like that. And so I was always kind of earning money, but I think I realized that the urgency to kind of make more safe, more kind of sustain myself here in Canada became a lot larger. And then I think something else that happened was that my dad came off a couple of battles with cancer, and that kind of took him off his job, put a strain on the medical bill. So it's a really rough time in terms of being a student. There's no kind of enjoying parties, Saturday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights, things like that. It was very much, put your head in the game, make sure you do what you can. There's no time to waste. But one of the drawbacks of that approach is that, one, I don't think when I look back on it now that I made a ton of memories. Sure, I have a great memories of UBC, but I don't think it was as much as I would have liked to have made. And friendships wise too, I made most of my friends in my first year, final year. Everything in between was very much just trying to survive. So I think my intention of doing this talk today is hopefully you don't have to make the same bad decisions I did. I kind of make more optimal decisions to make the most of your time, get through school, but also making memories, enjoying your time there too, right? Because that's, you're already all the way here, might as well make the most of it. So before I jump into kind of the more tactical points of the talk, are there kind of any questions that anyone wants to jump into? I'll kind of give it like a 10-second countdown since no one's cameras are on and can't tell anything. Cool, pushing forward then. So I kind of structured this out, work-life balance, into 3 elements, exactly as mentioned: work, not work-life balance, like work, studies, and life. And so that's kind of how I prioritized it as a student. Of course, I think I would have relocated some of the things I did back then differently now. But generally, I'll try to share some of the stories that I've been through, some of the fortunate encounters I've had, what I've learned from them, and hopefully, in what I learned, what mistakes I've made, you can kind of more consciously apply that to your own life as you pursue your careers, regardless of which stage of university you're in. So the first tip that I have for you, perhaps counterintuitively to a talk talking about financial difficulties about international students, is that it's not all about hard work when you're trying to, one, build your career and generate more earnings too. So my story, as mentioned, I kind of had that first job as a call center, but it wasn't enough because it was only $10 an hour. And even back then, before the inflation and everything, it's still not enough to kind of survive as a student. Even if you kind of have your tuition paid for at the time, you still need to get by week to week. It's not enough. And so my logic at the time was, I'm working during the day. I'm going to school in the mornings. I'm working during the afternoons, evenings. I thought I could squeeze in more work as like a security guard or janitor late into the nights. And I was kind of hunting down for those. But quite fortunately, I attended some random arts tribe mentorship program where I was matched up with some alumni from the arts program themselves. And I told her about this experience about wanting to look for a second job to get through the different bills. And she kind of pointed me straight to Van City where she worked. And that made so much more sense because instead of working double the hours for the same pay, I could just work one job and that would cover kind of all my living expenses. And so the average idea that I want to get through here is that when you're looking for jobs, I know, especially in your first, maybe second years, it's hard to kind of pick and choose beyond, let's say, a server job or kind of a retail associate kind of position. But it's still very much possible to, build out, look for things that will pay better, make better use of your time. I think one tangible example I can give to you right now is, for example, if you're going to work in food services, there's a difference between working at like a barista at Starbucks where you get a fixed max wage an hour, no one really tips the barista, versus if you work at like some restaurant where you do get tips and you do get some share of the tips, and that would help you increase. You spend some amount of time working, but your earning potential is just that much higher, and you also get the potential to build off from that. You have to work less hours, can spend more time in life, school, so on and so forth. So that's one. Next thing is in terms of, again, not always putting as many hours and stressing out as much as you can to working as much as you can, is trying to find a job that scales with effort. So maybe alluding to that tips example is that job I mentioned earlier about CFI, where I was paid on a per article basis. So in contrast to a lot of jobs where you're being paid maybe $10, $15, $18 per hour, and that's the absolute maximum you're going to earn, CFI was a very interesting position I came across because it was a concept where it's almost like Investopedia, if you guys have heard of that site, where it's kind of like informational articles, kind of like a Wikipedia for financial topics. And they were kind of looking to enter that same space. And the idea behind that was that it didn't matter what hours I put in, it didn't matter how long I worked or what I did. It's just as long as that article was submitted and they approved it, I got $40 for that. And so the idea was that I could work harder and my earnings would proportionally scale to my effort. So the harder I worked, the more I got. That was quite simply the logic. And I think it's because of positions like that, if you keep an eye out for those opportunities, you end up, just making better use of your time rather than just kind of grinding aimlessly. Another thing that kind of helped me in terms of not sticking to one job, because I see a lot of students, a lot of my peers, they kind of bounce from one food services to another food services, and it paid the bills, it got them through school, but it didn't really help them get further as time progressed. Again, scaling with the effort you put in, and that really comes down to building the credentials that you might have over time. So, for example, when I worked at Van City, I started to learn about the financial services system. I started learning about mortgages, and that was something CFI liked, and that's why they hired me. And when CFI liked that, the Ministry of Finance also learned from the work that I did at CFI, and that I could understand these kind of financial topics, and that's why they hired me. Scotiabank then learned from my experience at Ministry of Finance that I knew how to code, and so that's why they hired me, and so on and so forth. We kind of just keep snowballing from there. So I think the best use of your time, even though it kind of pays the same when I'm working in one versus the other, if you find positions that help you scale out over time and it pays off for the effort you put in, those are kind of what you should be optimizing for, rather than just kind of dropping by and taking on whatever that might come by. And kind of on the last note of work school life is do a co-op, because from a financial perspective at least, one, it lets you work 40 hours per week as an international student outside of the summer, which is absolutely fantastic for those of you who may be aware of your 20-hour work limit. I'm sure, I think there's some news about them lifting it. Primo, correct me, I'm so out of touch with that life now, but yeah, there was that limit there. And so having the co-op to remove that was absolutely fantastic, and take a break from school, which I think at the time only domestic students could because of your work permit requirements. So do that. It also takes a break from your tuition for the semester. Yes, it's an $800 co-op fee, but we know as international students that we pay a lot more per semester than $800. And so if your financial situation kind of warrants it, where you could use that break for payments to kind of shore up your own living expenses for your family to kind of figure things out, it's just helpful generally to kind of buy off that, period of liquidity. So strongly recommend a co-op. You kind of, again, simply it's a great way to get experience that scales out over time. It's not your kind of random whatever job. They tend to be quite good careers that will help you grow up. Even if it's not like a big company name, it's still very beneficial in terms of getting you to your next step. So cannot recommend enough in terms of getting that co-op position. And I had one more point in the workspace. I apologize for being somewhat disorganized today. It's been a long day. Invest in your resume and cover letter. So don't just kind of work blindly. Put a lot of time into, it's 300 words for a cover letter, roughly 100, 200 words for your resume. And the payout is incredible. Because if you think about it, between getting no resume to having a barely decent resume to get your job, that could take you from like $0 to $40,000. Having a somewhat better resume that gets you a somewhat better job, that could take you from $40,000 to $50,000, $60,000. And that having a very good resume that employers would want, and that would save you so much time that you don't have to apply for jobs so much anymore. That would give you like another 60 to 80K. They'll give you all your time back. You have a job nailed down early on. So honestly, it's a tiring process. I got rejected on average 80 times per job that I landed. So, but it only matters. You don't need one, right? You just need one person to say yes, and everyone else that said no before that become completely irrelevant. So don't just work hard, work on things that would pay off for you, if that makes sense. Cool. Yes, breaking here before I jump to the next sections. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Faith, yes.
Hi, thank you so
Hi.
much for sharing your story. It's been very encouraging to hear. I have two questions. The first one is about staying motivated during the job process. Did you face any difficulties with like landing the jobs or dealing with ghosting from recruiters or employers? And if so, how did you stay motivated?
100%. Like I said, 80 on average rejections per job I landed, but there were worse ones because when I graduated, I'm not sure you picked up on it, but I was a 2020 grad. So that was right when COVID was hitting as an absolute fucking shit show, right? I think I applied to 100, 120 jobs and I got rejected from a ton of them. And then I did, like I said, I picked up a job that paid me less than I did as an intern. So that was quite demotivating too. But end of the day, I think, how do you stay motivated? It's just kind of focus like, what's the payoff for these things? Is that, all of these that happens, it's, they're the ones missing out on your talent, on what you can do and what you can bring, all the experience you gain. Like as internationals, you grind hard. You have to grind so much harder than domestic students to get kind of the same output. So if they don't take you on, it's really their loss. And so just think of it that way, pardon my language, but fuck them. And say, you'll be fine, you'll be great. So
Thank you. And my second question is, how did you market the skills that you got from the jobs that are, I guess, kind of seen as, I guess, less desirable to get you into the door for the ideal jobs? Or did you even include them in your resume to begin with?
Yeah, I think it really depends where you are in your career and how many things you have on your resume to begin with. Like when I started out, like I said, I only had experience folding clothes, so that didn't really help with anything in terms of desirability or like jobs that would be useful. I remember though, going from that call center job, the first one I had at UBC to Van City, one line that kind of stuck out to me, or like one question that stood out to me was about how do you stay motivated throughout the day helping all these different customers. And I just remember something I picked up from my time working at the call center was that every customer that comes in, is brand new, or every person you call that comes in will be brand new. They have no previous experience to how bad the last call was. And so it's your job to kind of make the most of their experience to make sure that they get the same or best quality treatment you get. So in that sense, it wasn't so much that I had something very glowy, fancy technical skills from the call center job, but it's just having the experience, that little bit of nugget of wisdom that is relevant to the next position that you can then leverage and use to get you the job. I think that's one of the things that the manager seemed quite pleased with. I think that's kind of one of the reasons I got the job. If that answers the question.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Perfect. Anyone else? Like, I honestly love hearing your voices more than mine, so feel free to hop in. Okay, 10-second count. I'm going to move on since I do not see anything. All right, moving on. School. So I think I was a decent student. I wasn't the best student by any means. Wasn't like top 5% excellent scholarship or whatever you call it. I kind of just scraped by around usually A's, some B's, 1C, which I'm still quite pissed off of until this point. But yeah, it happens. That's life. But I think the general idea I want to get across with this section is, how do you make the most of getting the best grades you can with the time you have, with the stresses that you have, while at the same time knowing that getting the absolute top grade, like a 90, 95%, isn't going to have that much incremental value over like an 88, right? Sure, maybe if you're taking a 4.33 scale, the 90s do help. But let's say getting from the 80 to an 85 or 85 to an 88, it's, there's a lot more effort that goes into it, but kind of what's the payoff and, what's the best way to manage your time, school, life, friends, everything like that. So the first one, which might seem so obvious, you might just drop off the call right away, is pay attention in class, just because I've seen so many people skip class or kind of play on their phones, come in sleep deprived, and end up before exam day, they start cramming and spending so much time trying to catch up on what was already mentioned by the professors, right? So I've had some very good friends who did much better than me in school. All they did is pay attention in class. They took their notes right after class ended, and they went off to do their jobs and whatnot. And they did perfectly fine, no cramming whatsoever. They had time for friends. They had a life in school, and they still got good grades. And it really that came down to the study. I don't think they were that much smart. Yeah, they're smart people. But it really comes down to that strategy of, if you're going to be in class anyway, make the most out of it. And so you don't have to use it elsewhere. If you're not going to pay attention in class, just skip it and catch up later on and use the time to spend with friends, right? So do one or the other, don't half-ass it. Don't stay in the middle. Again, part of my language, I am terrible at being decent. Next one is don't pursue GPA boosters, because intuitively it might seem like a good idea for people in our kind of situation where you don't have a lot of money, you need to work, you want to do the minimum effort to get a good grade. But what I noticed is that one, it hurts you in your job hunting process, because employers, at least the ones I've spoken to, about more than half of them, talk about your transcripts, and they're not looking at the number, they're looking at the courses you took. And so if some people start bringing up, oh, why do you take, I'm not sure if you're still a GPA booster in your school, but when I was at UBC, it was Earth and Ocean Sciences and one of those courses. I see Primo laugh, he probably knows it, probably took it anyway. Okay. So you start talking about these things, and it looks so blatantly obvious that you have no interest in the course and you took it as a GPA booster, and it kind of reflects on your work ethic. Kind of shows like, oh, this person just trying to cruise by. And so kind of save yourself the embarrassment, don't take the GPA booster. And from what I've seen as well is that the people who kind of hype up these kind of GPA booster courses, they tend to just want to cruise by. They just kind of want to get like a C- passing grade, and they're fine with it. They pass the course, they're going to move on with life. But I think kind of as internationals, there's some scholarships, you need some great requirements. And again, similarly, we were talking about having to balance work and all these other stresses. If you're taking on a course that you really do not enjoy, it's going to be painful. Sorry, I had to censor myself there. It's going to be really painful to pursue that course throughout your school term. And you're really not going to enjoy it. You're going to find it to be such a drag when you have to work, coming back tired, you have to do coursework. You're going to have no energy for it. It's better to pursue something that seems hard at first, but if you can find yourself enjoying the class, you'll be able to talk about it during your interviews. You'll be able to make friends in that class who share that passion, and you're able to carry that forth. If you don't share that passion, from what I've seen, a lot of people connect about the courses they really like. So again, it's kind of like tying into that life aspect. It helps save time for socializing if you're already connecting people who are interesting to you and who have similar interests to you, rather than I'm just taking this random EOS course. I'm going to cruise in the background. I'm not going to like it. I'm going to waste my time there. So just don't do it. Kind of last thing on the school point is kind of learn how you learn, again, to make studying as effective as possible, to not waste your time, to make it as painless as possible. I'm not sure how many of you probably relate to this, but I thought I didn't like math. I thought it was painful. I kind of hated it. And I was an arts kid. I kind of said I didn't want to do any of that. I was going to study marketing in business school, stuff like that. But I think I took some personality tests and I kind of realized it's just all random, completely unrelated. I was trying to do it to be better at school, anything like that. I realized like I'm a very intuitive thinker. I like to know the why behind things. And I'm not sure if that kind of shows in the 10 minutes that you've known me. I tend to be quite rebellious. So I don't like being told what to do. And math was kind of suited, kind of the way it was taught at least was kind of just you grind your exercises, you do all these calculations, keep doing your differential equations. You don't know why, just do it. And I kind of suffered as a result. But one day I just picked up this book from the UBC library. I think that's called The Power of Mathematical Thinking or something along those lines. And so this kind of gave me a way to learn about math without doing practice questions. I learned the intuition behind it. I used real life examples to understand it. And it kind of helped make studying a lot easier. It made all my future quantitative courses a lot more, you get my words right. It made it less painful to go through them. And it kind of get me better grades as well, because I kind of figured out finally that how I learn best is to understand the why behind things. And once I got that, I don't really need to grind so much on kind of mindless exercises. I kind of know what I need to know in order to make the best use of my study time. And so kind of whatever courses it may be, whatever approach you take, kind of learn how you learn, and that will save your time. It'll make studying fun. And you can spend time doing other things more productively, whatever that may be. So I think that's all I have for my school section. Life is going to be even shorter, but again, similar. Taking a break here. Any questions, thoughts, comments so far? Oh, yes, Faith, let's go.
Hi again.
Yes.
I do have a question about like what you mentioned about taking courses and maybe kind of struggling through some of them. How did you overcome any limiting beliefs that you might have had in terms of the courses that you took? Or maybe another way of phrasing it is, did you go through a phase of imposter syndrome? And if you did, how did you navigate that?
100%. I've definitely been through imposter syndrome, particularly when like I mentioned, I initially told myself I wasn't like a quantitative mathematical person, but I ended up taking finance as my major. And I'm not sure if you're familiar, but finance is like the most quantitative course within Sauder's school. And I kind of did that because my motivation was that, what's my weakness? And let me go tackle it head on. I may not be a mathematical person, but I'll try my best to figure out how to, make it work. In terms of the imposter syndrome side of things, you're a student, right? It's fine to not know, like that's your job. That's why you're there. It's because you're not supposed to know what you're passionate in or interested in. You just go there, you learn and figure it out. I think grades are secondary, because once you find your interest in a topic, the work itself will come naturally, and the grades will come naturally once you put the work in. And so again, focus on the intrinsic motivation first about what you have to learn. Even if, let's say, you take a course, you're stuck in it, you pass your withdrawal deadline, and you realize that maybe this is not such a great fit for you. Take it class by class. Find out what can you learn today. What can I learn from this lecture? How could I apply it to the other courses I'm interested in? And just go from there. Because I think not everything, you wouldn't like all your courses equally. Some will be more interesting than others. But that doesn't mean some of the less interesting courses don't have something that it could still potentially offer you. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yeah, it did. Thanks.
Cool. Anyone else? Nope. All right. Last thing, life, the shortest element of it. So I guess when I mentioned life in this case, I kind of think of it from the first element is just getting by first, before we talk about all the enjoyments and experiences that you can get as a student. I think given the audience and at least the topic that I picked out in the audience, I thought it would attract, I kind of thought, well, how do you get by first and foremost? And then from there, how do you make the most of the different elements of experiences and friendships? So in terms of getting by, my interests at the time were very much music related. So I liked playing the guitar, as I mentioned earlier, I liked learning different instruments, but that was not something that was very readily affordable in Canada because, guitars would be like $500,000 and that's just not feasible on my situation. And so what I did was I looked for ways I could rent or borrow from friends. And so again, if you can find a group, a society on UBC that kind of matches your interests, they usually have a lot of equipment that would cost a lot of money because UBC and the AMS pays for it. So you can very easily just go in, grab it yourself. If there's no club, that means that you can easily make one yourself. It's not easy. It's quite a tedious paperwork process. If anyone's in the AMS, I apologize in advance because it is quite painful. But yeah, if you get over that hurdle of the paperwork, there's a lot of support, financial support that are given to clubs. If you can find enough people who would align on your interests, they'll give you money and you can use that money to kind of buy the things you want. So through the club, you can get stuff you like to play with, if that makes sense. Other things is like UBC's gym. If you're more of a fitness person, is one of the cheapest you can find. If you're not into gymming, running is also, free things. So a lot of free things to do. You don't have to go to Whistler every weekend. Like if you hear conversation in class on Monday, sometimes you hear, oh yeah, I used to go with a weekend to Whistler, and you probably wouldn't be able to afford that if you're in the demographic that I imagine you are. But at the same time, too, that doesn't stop you from having kind of your own fun experiences, having things that connect with your friends who, again, share similar interests outside of work. So you can connect with them in that way, connect to clubs. And I think don't restrict your friendships that you can make in your time at UBC to school itself. A lot of my friendships, I think, actually came out of work. So when I mentioned, part-time jobs, co-op, you can use that to kind of build your relationships as well. One story that I had was I was quite close to my manager at Scotiabank, and he introduced me to his childhood best friend who was in Vancouver, and we kind of hung out over there. And so it's just kind of like different connections you can just jump and make, as long as you keep an open mind as to where your friendships are coming from, and they don't all have to be in the same age group and the same situation as you. So yeah, I think there's quite a lot that you can do in that aspect. So I'm a little bit unprepared on that life side. I do apologize in advance. I didn't have so much time as I wanted to prepare for this. But yeah, I think that's all I have from my side. Primo, audience, any questions from your side?
Yeah, thank you so much, Elson, for sharing some of those insights into how you're able to get through as an international student. I do have some questions prepared for the Q&A portion, but I'm gonna put it open to the audience in case anyone is interested in asking a question. You could feel free to put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand now.
But you folks came here for a reason, right? So I would love to hear like why you came even. So feel free to ask. Like I want to make this time the most beneficial it could be for you. So feel free to ask.
Yeah. If not, I can go with some of my questions, Elson, if you don't mind.
Cool. For sure. Go for it.
Sure. So one of our first question is, how did you know if what career you're going to is the right fit for you, and where you want to start? If yes, what made you so certain of it? And if no, how did you decide on when to shift your focus?
Let's see. My career aspirations, I think they're never set in stone. I think anyone who tells you need to know what you're going to do by the time you graduate, or the year before you graduate, is kind of full of themselves. I don't think you need to figure that out. Honestly, I'm kind of 2-3 years into my career, kind of getting promoted up the ranks. And I'm still kind of figuring out, what's my next step? What do I really want to do? Do I want to keep on doing this data work? Do I want to go become a boxing instructor? Do I want to open a restaurant? So I don't think the question of asking what you want to do should ever end, as long as you keep an open mind again about, what you want from life and trying to make the most of it. But in terms of how I got my career and how I figured that part out, while I was working at Vancity, they had one time where they brought in kind of students working for them into the head office, kind of give them a tour of what different functions each part of Vancity works on. And one manager mentioned something along the lines of coding is very important, and it will save you so much time and help you automate so many things. And that's what I love. I love to automate things and save myself from doing boring things over and over again. And so I kind of just took on this one online course in Python, realized I loved it. I just went deeper from there, kind of took some student competitions in data, kind of won, and it helped me kind of leverage my way to get each of the additional jobs from there. And when I realized I kind of enjoyed it, I just kept going further and further. Like, am I married to data? Definitely not. I can always still pivot out if I wanted to do something different. But I think at the time, I just kind of found something that seemed remotely interesting and pursued it the best I could, making the best decisions I could at the time. And I think it turned out pretty decently.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Just following on, you said you mentioned coding skills as an important skill that you were able to learn and helped in your career your career right now. What other skills did you develop also early on in your career that have helped you today, or also during your undergrad? Is there anything you wish you might have learned during while you were at school at UBC?
What I wish I would have learned more while I was at UBC?
Yeah.
Honestly, the soft skills, because I think technical skills wise, despite coming from a business background, most people think it shouldn't be technical. I'm kind of like one of the most technical people on my team right now. Like I think I learned over the course of my time 7 different coding languages and use 3 on a regular basis. But I think the soft skills element, the kind of what I was alluding to about, being efficient with work and school so they can spend more time in life is really important because I'm not sure whether I mentioned this earlier, but there was this dream job that I had, kind of very big companies, really smart kids apply for that. I wanted to go there. And I got to the final round, I was in the top 3 out of thousands they interviewed across Canada. And the night before the final round of interviews, they actually invited us out to very fancy dinner. It was like some French restaurant in Toronto that was like $100 per person. And I was clearly out of my element. I was so optimized for, work, coding, school that when it came to talking about like, hey, what sports do you watch last night? I was like, I don't know. I don't have a TV. I don't know anything about sports teams. They asked me things like, oh, what do you pursue if that's not related to, getting further of your career or doing better at school? I was like, I don't know. I'm so optimized in school and career. I didn't really know what else to learn. So that's kind of what I wish I knew earlier. What I kind of learned earlier was having more of that people skills, the more open-mindedness to try new things, is it not be so fixated on just school, work, money. So if that answers the question.
That definitely does, and thank you so much for sharing that. I guess before I go into my next question, I just want to open up again to the floor in case anyone has any questions. You could feel free to put it in chat or also private message me, or you could also raise your hand. I can also continue with some of the questions I have. So Elson, you mentioned that you were a data engineer at a private equity group. I was wondering, do you mind elaborating into how does your day-to-day look like? And I guess specifically within that, what do you enjoy most working in your industry?
Mm-hmm. So let's see how I can break this down. I'll take the second half of the question first about most about the industry. Is a private equity group tends to own many different companies, and ours owns about 15, 16, like I mentioned earlier. And the interesting thing is that by working for this one private equity group, I can work with multiple companies at the same time. Right now, I'm kind of supporting 3 different companies. So I'm pretty much working for 3 very different companies. One's like janitorial services, which is interesting. Like I would never work for janitorial services in my if not my own choice, but being in a private, it gives you that openness to try new things. So I took that. Another one's like oh shit. Am I still connected? Am I disconnected? Still connected. Okay, cool. Another thing was what was it? My headphones into my train of thought. Yeah, knife delivery company. So it goes into different kitchens around US, and they sharpen your knives. So it's a very interesting business to explore. And the last one was it's not a collision repair shop. It's like if your car scratches, you go get it repainted, but it's the company that sells paint to the car shops. And so it's you get to see elements of business you wouldn't usually see and you wouldn't actually think about. I think as a student, you kind of look at, working for the big TELUS, the big 5 banks, Rogers, Bell, you think about the consulting firms, KPMG, Deloitte, so on and so forth. You don't really get to see all these different industries and how niche they are. I think that's one really interesting thing about private equity. Another thing about it is that you have some of the smartest business people kind of sitting right across from you. Like these are the people who not just, a lot of consulting firms say, we report to the heads of certain departments or we talk to the CEOs. These are the people that the CEOs report to. It's incredible that I'm sharing the office with kind of these minds, and I can just walk up to them anytime I can have a conversation with them. So to tap into their brain and to kind of explain their thinking on what makes a company good to buy versus not, it's fascinating. So I think just hearing from them, hearing them speak is already really, really cool. But now diving into that first part of the question about what I actually do, I was actually told not to mention too many specifics because it could influence our strategy, and it's a few $100 million or something does leak out. But generally, what I do is, one, I automate a lot of stuff. So things that would take people hours to figure out to do, I use my code to make it go away. So it works in the background, you never see it again, but it's doing all the same work. So that's the core of what I do. Other things is I support data analysts in terms of problems that are too technical. When they try Googling and they still can't quite figure it out, they come to me to kind of try to untangle the problem. So I'm almost like just a general problem solver for very technical things. So let's see if I can give any examples that doesn't get me in trouble. Damn, this is hard. Sorry, but basically I'm like the next level Google. So when they Google something, they can't get it, they come to me and I try to help them untangle their problems. The last piece is I'm also still part of a team that's focused very much on strategy. So I mentioned earlier that we had kind of CFO that was asking kind of high level business questions, like how many businesses are in this market. We had some of the big consulting firms that come in for like multi-million-dollar consulting contracts, kind of help business people like CFO, CEOs figure out these questions. We kind of internalize that, we build it out ourselves, and we give that to our portfolio companies to kind of understand the market that they're operating in a lot better. So again, this comes back maybe less from a technical thing, but more to the business side. I think it's unique to be working in a private equity firm, but you get this kind of exposure to audience, and we know what the CEOs are thinking, what questions they have, and how we can answer them. So hopefully that kind of taps into what I like about PE and what I do day to day.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Elson, despite it probably maybe being a sensitive topic or like a secret topic for you. Moving on to a question that I think Fate had in the chat. What is something you want to accomplish before this year is over? And maybe just to add like some probing question, I guess, like how do you set your goal setting, and I guess how do you set your goal setting in relation to that?
So I think my personal goals, like my kind of start of the year goals, I have two, one on the physical side, two on the creative side. I don't really have any work goals, but not for the year, at least on the bigger picture. So personal goals, like I just want to get fitter, lift more weights. I kind of hit my first one about deadlifting 225 pounds, but I don't think you're here for that. You're not interested in that. Music wise, I want to write a song, perform, but again, I don't think you're interested in that. Work wise, again, I don't have a specific goal for the year. I'm more interested in what I want to do before I die. It sounds very morbid, but I read this book called When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, I believe, who was like a really smart neurosurgeon, and he got cancer, and he's kind of writing a memoir as he had cancer, and he kind of died. But he kind of had this very interesting take about what you do, how do you make the most of your life. I think for me, in terms of what I want to do, is kind of build out something that will live beyond me from a technology point of view, because I won't go into all whole specifics, but I kind of had this whole phase. I want to be a physiotherapist. I could help individuals who, kind of recover and experience that happiness from recovery. Then I thought I wanted to be a biomedical engineer who would be able to build out these things that also help people who are injured in a similar sense. And then kind of went into venture. I thought I wanted to get into venture capital who would invest in the companies that build these things. But I'm thinking, how do I scale that out further and have my own company that can solve some of these problems? It's very big. I'm kind of like a big picture, vague guy, head in the sky kind of thing. But the idea is that I'm thinking I'll become a senior data engineer in order to build my technical skills and eventually work at the same time, grow my technical skills that are tangential to my job in order to one day become like the technical co-founder of my own startup that hopefully will save lives and all that good stuff. So that's kind of my goal. Hopefully that answers your question, Faith.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, and Faith, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to post in the chat, or anyone else also feel free to post in the chat, or raise your hand and you can go to your question. Moving on to some of the other questions. Oh, Faith, I can pass it on to you.
Yes, I think this is more about like your job. And something that I'm kind of interested in is blockchains. So like how prevalent are they in what you do or in your industry? And where do you see them going in the future?
For sure. So I'm sorry to be, if this is not the answer you're looking for, but it's not very relevant to my industry at the moment, just because it's still very much untested technology. When you look at the actual applications of being able to track accurate data over a large network, it's there are already a lot of technologies that will serve that purpose. And where it's going, it's still very much up in the air. It's still hard to see what exactly the incremental value of using decentralized ledgers are over centralized proprietary ledgers. If you're interested in the topic, I think the Bank of Canada has a project called Jasper. And I remember attending a talk once and they're talking about how they were implementing blockchain internally within Canada and testing out big five banks. And it was very much a process of, oh, let's start off with, this whole blockchain that everyone's been talking about, exactly as how the markets made it out to be. You included all these people from the big five who kind of talk about the individual use cases, all the restrictions, and they kind of okay, we can't make it be as open as initially set out to be, and so it kind of shrunk down and became more private. And this iterative process of shrinking it down kind of made it look almost exactly like the existing system, that there was not much value in switching over. So that kind of it kind of just died in the water from my knowledge. I think it's more relevant now in the individual clearances of securities. Again, if I'm saying too much technobabble, stop me. But it's more relevant with those high frequency trades, and that's what they're looking into. But in the general, at least from what space I look in financial services, there wasn't a lot of incremental value in the application of blockchain.
Okay, thank you. So do you think it's just a buzzword and something that's a hot topic, or is it something that's worth pursuing in terms of studying?
I think the underlying value of cryptography seems promising. So that's not the blockchain itself, but the process of using the computers to cryptographically encrypt and decrypt the blocks themselves. Again, I'm no expert. I just kind of read these different articles about it. To answer your question, whether it's something worth studying, like you seem to have interest in it, so I would say that's enough reason to go study it. I think as niche as something may be, if it interests you, 100% go do it. It will definitely grow beyond the capabilities of what I understand myself, and it could definitely be applications out there. I know it's very much of an emerging technology. Like if it becomes big, it's going to be massive. If not, it's going to be irrelevant, but you'll still pick up a lot of useful skills along the way. So I think if it's something you're interested in, there's really very little loss to you if you want to pursue that further.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're down to 4 of you. Anyone else have any questions? An open invite too, if you don't feel comfortable being in this recorded session, saying anything there, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or whatever, and we can chat there too. Very open to help. So let me know.
I can move on to some of the questions that I saw prepared.
That's good.
Okay. So one of the questions, at times we hear about the disadvantages and also gaps associated with being an international student. Can you speak a bit about the advantages and strengths that you bring with you to your career because of your international status?
Mm-hmm. I saw that question in the list that you sent to me, and I was quite amused by that because I was trying to think of what's the best way to answer this. And to be perfectly honest, from my point of view, there are very few advantages to being an international student in the workspace. What I can say though is what you get from being an international student, from having to work 2 times harder than everyone else for the same output, is that you really have that resilience to keep grinding, to keep pushing, and eventually that pays off. Because from what I've seen post-graduation, when people get their first jobs, you kind of see where things settle. Like people may work very hard in schools, and some of the smartest people are grinding absolutely hard right now to get where they want to be in their first job. But once they get there, I see a lot of people just kind of plateau and they kind of flatten out there and they don't really push further. From what I've seen from the international people that I've met, they just keep going. They're never satisfied, whether for good or for bad. They just keep pushing and they just keep growing. As a result, I think it's something that you will develop, hustling, being in your circumstances, feeling that things are disadvantaged towards you. You gain that resilience, you gain that drive, and that's going to serve you for a long time coming. And that will eventually, at some point, you won't feel like you have to work 2 times harder than everyone else to get the same output. You'll be working as you usually do to get more because you're just going to keep growing. So don't do so.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely agree with the points you mentioned of the hustle mindset. Kind of following up onto that, what kind of daily habits or actions did you curate in your personal life that you think could contribute positively to your professional life, while also maybe maintaining a balance?
Mhm. I think the first thing, it sounds odd, but figure out what sleep works for you best. I know there are a lot of articles out there that say, "Oh, wake up at 5 a.m. and you'll be Jeff Bezos or Jamie Dimon or whatever, Elon Musk," that kind of bullshit. But honestly, I think I read a book called Why We Sleep. I think Matt Walker, Matt Turner, something along those lines, and it pretty much just talks about all the benefits of sleep. And one of the points he went into was everyone sleeps differently. Some people are just naturally night owls. They sleep midnight after midnight and they'll get their sleep. Some people sleep early, like me, and I sleep around 9 usually, and I try to get up around 5. And it's not because I'm trying to grind and become a CEO or anything like that. It's just what suits me, is what works for me. And I think as a result, figuring that out, finding out that how that optimizes me, it kind of everything falls into place after that. The night before, when I get home from work, whether it's 7 or 8 p.m., I kind of know there's so much downtime, so much prep I need to do in order to sleep. When I want to sleep, I'll get my full 8 hours in. I'll wake up at 5. I can head to the gym. I have some downtime before I head to the gym. When I come back, I have some of my free time that other people would have usually at the end of the day. And that works for me. So I think find out what works for you, build habits around it. I think there's another book called Atomic Habits, which I strongly recommend if you haven't read it already. It's like building habits that work for you, and yeah, just go from there.
Thank you for sharing that, Elson. I guess shifting more towards career,
Mhm.
how would you suggest someone can pursue their passion and also purpose from the start of their career?
Pursuing their passion and their purpose from the start of the career. So I may have a somewhat contradictory tale from you as a result. So of my experiences at least. When I graduated, I wanted to go into neo financials because I was very much driven by the purpose of the financial institution needs to become more equitable. We need to make it so that people don't get screwed over by the financial services system like the way my parents did, in terms of getting out of debt, not quite knowing how it all works, and kind of causing stress for everyone through good intentions. And so when I went to New, I thought I was going to go disrupt the financial services system, which is what I was passionate about. And when things didn't quite align for me, I very quickly became burnt out. I kind of like, why am I doing this? Why are all the thoughts that I had, all the ideas I had, all the values and the mission I wanted not line up with the career I was having? And that ended up straining me quite a bit. And so I kind of floated between different jobs. I think I went to Deloitte, and similar concept was in financial crimes. I thought I was going to go, catch some criminals and just, be a good guy, save the world kind of thing. And it didn't quite pan out when, I was just working on, I was going to increase the profits for one of the big 5 banks. Is that really what I want to do with my life? And now I'm at private equity, and not being cynical, but the goal of private equity is to make more money. And it seems like there's no big purpose behind that. But I think what it's got me going on is that I have a job that's, I'm interested enough in the topics. It pays me well. It gives me the time I need to kind of pursue my passions outside of it. And using that kind of safety to know that I have that stability in my life, I can then explore the other passions and what I find purposeful and meaningful in my life. So I think in terms of being tied in with your passion to your purpose early on, from my experience at least, find something that will take care of your basic needs first, your employment, put your food on the table, rent a roof over your head. And then from there, you can start exploring things on the side. Eventually, maybe you can marry the two. I don't think you should go into the start of a career thinking, my job and my company is going to align so well with my values and my ideals that you end up getting burnt out the same way I did. I think especially when you go in as a grunt, you cannot underestimate the kind of work they'll give a new grad to do. It may not always be the most exciting. They won't let you make the big decisions or stuff like that, which is reasonable. But I think at the time I went in way too idealistic, and that kind of ended up hurting me in the process. So go in realistically and kind of build your passions on the side, and eventually try to marry the two.
Thank you so much, Elson. And I definitely agree. I think you being able to leverage like your career to just pursue some of your passion is definitely really interesting, and I think a good takeaway that many students can take from today's session. And I guess before we finish off for today, I'd like to just give you one last final word. What's the most important takeaway that you'd like the audience to leave with today?
It's not all about hard work. You got to work smart, make the right decisions, and find balance. It's not again, just working all the time will bite you in the ass if that's all you do. So find balance, make smart decisions, make the most of the time, and I'm here for you if you need me. I know that's not one, but I tried.
No worries. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much again to our credible speaker for sharing his experience and insights today. And of course, also a big thank you to all of you for choosing to be part of today's office hour. We'll be emailing you all a post-event survey at the end of this session in order to ensure you receive a link to our event survey for a chance to win a $25 Uber Eats gift card and also get a recording of the webinar. Please take a few moments to fill out our attendance survey if you haven't done so already. And yeah, thank you so much everyone for attending today's Alumni Office Hour.